membership. All right, now what we're here to see tonight. Bob Roth is one of the most experienced and sought-after meditation teachers in the world, with 45 years experience teaching transcendental meditation to CEOs, Hollywood celebrities, combat-scarred veterans, and inner-city youth. He currently serves as the CEO of the David Lynch Foundation and also directs Center for Leadership Performance. Bob is the host of the Sirius XM radio show Success Without Stress, and speaks frequently about the science of meditation to industry leaders at such gatherings as Google Zeitgeist, Aspen Ideas Festival, Wisdom 2.0 and Summit, and of course now at Town Hall Seattle. Roth's book, Strength In Stillness, The Power of Transcendental Meditation, is the subject of tonight's event. He'll be joined on stage by the one and only David Lynch. David is a 3-time Oscar-nominated director and filmmaker. From the early 70s to the present day, Lynch's popular and critically acclaimed film projects, which include, of course, Eraserhead, The Elephant Man, Wild at Heart, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, and Twin Peaks, are internationally considered to have broken down the wall between art house cinema and Hollywood movie making. He is founder and chairman of the board of the David Lynch Foundation for Consciousness-Based Education and World Peace, as well as the author of his own book, Catching the Big Fish, Meditation, Consciousness, and Creativity, which, as I mentioned, you can purchase at the third place table up front. Please join me in offering a warm town hall welcome to Bob Roth.
I have a lot to say, but I have to just say right off the bat that, like I'm sure many of you, very troubled by the news from Florida today about that school. And as we talk and go along this evening, for me, meditation is not just about personal development, it's about social transformation and how it can be used for that. So what I want to do is give you a little background. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit of my story on myself for the first 2 hours. Kidding. Not that we're not eager to hear from David, but when I was 5 years old. And I'm going to define terms. I'm going to explain what meditation, such a abstract term these days. Meditation, it's like medication or food. And so what do we mean by that? And what does science say about that? And tonight we're looking at one meditation, transcendental meditation. This is not I'm going to be because if I was sitting in the audience, I would have the same thought. This is not a sales thing on transcendental meditation. This is just to inform you of what this is so you make informed decisions. It's important to know. So 50 years ago, pretty much today, I was in my senior year at Redwood High School in Larkspur, California. I grew up in a very political family. We talked politics all the time. And I like to say my family was so political, and this is an appropriate venue, that I knew I was a Democrat well before I knew I was Jewish. I did. And if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. In February 1968, I was the co-editor of my high school newspaper. And just to give you an indication of how politically and active engaged, I had a column in the newspaper which was entitled The Gripes of Roth. So I complained about everything, what should be changed, all that stuff that was going on. I worked for Bobby Kennedy. I wanted to change the world. And on June 1st, 1968, I was at the San Francisco Civic Auditorium and saw Bobby Kennedy speak. And it wasn't a question of left or right. It was a question of I felt I was part of something big that was going to change things at a foundational level. And 4 days later, he was gone. And that made such a huge imprint on me, that in September 1968, I entered, this is tediously slow, I know, but I'm going to get to that. I entered University of California at Berkeley, not as a hippie or a druggie or a radical, just a guy who I planned on going to Bolt Law School and becoming a U.S. Senator like Bobby Kennedy and changing the world. While I was there, the reality of politics dawned. And I realized that, and today I'm still a political junkie, still drives me nuts, but I realized that politics was never going to be able to heal the soul of the nation. And my mom was an educator. So I thought, okay, write educational curriculum. Start working with kids. And by then I was working with inner city school kids. Start working with kids at an early age. Give them the tools that they could really grow. And I love the quote from William Butler Yeats, which was, education is not about filling a pail, it's about lighting a fire. And along the way, I'm going to school full-time, working full-time. Tanks parked outside my door because of the riots, on Vietnam riots, and something stupid called People's Park, where people got killed over. And a friend of mine who was sane, Berkeley, 1968, said I should learn transcendental meditation. And I did not, it was not a word in my vocabulary. And my first response was, I have enough issues with my own religion, because I didn't know. And the second was, why? And he said, you're pretty stressed. And I said, I'm a skeptic. He said, doesn't make any difference. And so I learned it. I trusted him. And one of my first meditations was so significant of transcending, of settling down deeply. And my whole tightly wound 18, going away to college first year is not so anyway. But when you got tanks parked outside your door, it's a whole different thing. And just like that, I felt this deep, deep relaxation, and yet inside, in my mind, settled and wide awake. Just me. And I thought, whoa. Now, some people learn to meditate, and one of their first thoughts are, oh, I want to get enlightened. This is great. One of my first thoughts was, oh, I want to teach this to inner city school kids. And that was 1969. That was June 28th, 1969. So fast forward to today, when I have the great honor of heading up David Lynch's foundation, which was established 12 and a half years ago, with initially a single purpose, to bring the benefits of TM to any child anywhere in the world who wanted to learn to meditate, make it available. We now have provided scholarships for about 600,000 kids to learn how to meditate. Great. But for me, a painful drop in the bucket, because children are suffering and parents are suffering. And I promise not to turn this into a bummer talk, but suffering. And something foundational has to happen in society today. And increasingly, fortunately, as a culture, we are looking to meditation, plural, big, writ large, as a possible approach to address this epidemic of stress and trauma in life. So what I want to do is I want to just take a moment and define some terms. Because how many people here have tried some form of meditation? Yeah, it's almost like you go the other way around. So it used to be thought, I started meditating a long time ago, it used to be thought that all meditations were basically the same. Didn't really matter what you did. First of all, they thought it was just bogus. 50 years ago, you're just wasting your time. But then some initial research came out on TM in 1968, 1969, 1970, published in Science and Scientific American, showed that it reduced blood pressure, woke up the brain. So then people begrudgingly said, okay, there's something to meditation. But it was just this general thing. It didn't matter what you did. That was meditation. It was beneficial. Fortunately, in the last 10 or 15 years, brain research, looking at what happens in the brain when we meditate, has revealed some very interesting conclusions or indications. That because we know that every experience impacts the brain in a specific way, if you listen to classical music, it has one impact on the brain. If you listen to electronic music, another impact on the brain. If you watch a romantic comedy, it has one impact on the brain. If you watch David Lynch films, he's back there listening. has another impact on the brain. Just if you watch other films, Dave. So what they did is they looked at meditation, and they found that there are 3 basic types of meditation. I think it's very interesting. The first is called focused attention. The second is called open monitoring. And the third is called self-transcending. And before I get into that, I'm going to use an analogy. Everybody with me here? Okay. You're on a little boat, and you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And all of a sudden, you get these giant waves, 30, 40-foot high waves. And you could rightfully think the whole ocean is in upheaval. But the word whole is a bit of a stretch. Because if you could do a cross-section of the ocean out there, you'd realize you got these little, relatively speaking, 30-foot waves, but the ocean in reality is a mile deep or more. And while the ocean by its nature can be turbulent on the surface, the ocean by its nature is pretty darn silent and quiet at its depth. And that is the analogy I like to use for the mind. The surface of our mind is like those waves, choppy waves. And sometimes they call it the monkey mind. I like to call it the gotta mind. I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to call him, and I got to call her, and I got to make a list, and I got to find the list. Then I got to make a new list, and I got to slow down, but I got to get going. I got to get to sleep, but I got to get anybody? And so it's a natural human desire. I'd like to have some inner calm, some inner clarity, some inner focus, some inner connectedness, some inner ease, and the operative word there is inner. And the question is there such a thing as an inner? And if so, how do you get there? And so the purpose of meditation, one of the main fundamental purposes of meditation throughout time, was to bring ease or peace or equanimity to the mind. So 3 basic types of meditation. Now this is broad brush because we do want to get to David, but broad brush. The first one I called focused attention. Those are your vipassana, classic concentration forms of meditation, where the attempt is to clear the mind of thoughts or control the mind, focus intently on your breath, on a thought, on a bodily sensation, and it's like trying to stop waves on the surface of the ocean. And that focused attention meditation, according to research, creates gamma brain waves, which are 20 to 50 cycles per second, very fast, usually in the prefrontal cortex, the left side. And that gamma brain waves comes about. Is this interesting? Okay. Wait a minute. Comes about when, it's interesting to me, when your child is focused, concentrating. Just the brain is working hard. And a focused attention is a cognitive process to control the mind, control thoughts. So that's one. Open monitoring is the second. There are many mindfulness techniques within this. Actually, there's mindfulness in both areas because there's many mindfulness techniques. But open monitoring is and many of you will know this, is an observational tool. It is sort of emotionally or dispassionately observing your thoughts, your feelings, your bodily functions. You do body scans. You take 10 breaths. Anybody do that sort of thing? Yeah. Very effective tool for a coping mechanism. It's to sort of also take us out of the past or the future. So if you have the thought of Joe, and if you don't know any Joe, But if Joe done you wrong 2 days ago or 20 years ago, and the name Joe comes up, so we learn how to be present, that equanimity of the present and not the past or the future. And when we do that, that creates something called theta brain waves, which are 6 to 8 cycles per second. That's a pre-onset dream. It also, because your eyes are closed, it creates alpha 2 brain waves, 10 to 12 cycles per second in the back of the brain, occipital lobe. Also some beta brain waves, which is sort of waking state. A marvelous coping tool. how to observe the waves rise and fall. The third is self-transcending, transcendental meditation. And in this, we do something interesting. Well, everything is interesting, but we do something else interesting. We recognize that there is a vertical dimension to the mind. We feel things deeply. We know things in our gut. Our intuition tells us something, abstract feeling level, a transcendent level of the mind. We look for transcendent moments. When we hold a newborn baby in our arms, it's a transcendent moment. Time slips away. Sometimes we have that moment with a partner, such intimate communication. It's a transcendent moment. Athletes talk about the zone, where there's a calm and everything's coming out crazy, and yet there's a calm and a silence and actually a happiness. So that transcendent level of us. And in transcendental meditation, we don't mind the thoughts. We don't try to block out the thoughts. And we'll go into more of this a little later. But we learn a technique. We're given a mantra, which is a word or a sound that has no meaning. And we're taught in personal instruction. I'm saying all this to define terms, so when David's talking about this, you have what he's talking about. And we learn how to just let the active thinking mind settle down and access that deepest faint feeling level of me, my own inner nature, which is a big place, it turns out. When that happens, something called the brainwave signature is something called alpha 1. That's 8 to 10 cycles per second, and that is a state of deep settledness and wide awake inside. And because the mind and the body are so intimately connected, when your agitated thinking mind transcends and settles down to that equanimity within, your body gains a state of rest deeper in many regards than the deepest part of deep sleep. And one thing, and then say a few more things, and we'll turn it over to David. You know what cortisol is? Not a friend. I mean, we do need cortisol to get up in the morning. When we're sleeping, cortisol levels sort of start going down, and then when we're about to get up, then they start creeping back up, because cortisol is a hormone secreted by the adrenals, which sit on top of the kidney. But the problem is we have adrenal burnout. We have so much cortisol we could, flood the city. It is too much cortisol comes about when we feel anxious, anxiety, and too much cortisol undermines and compromises the immune system, the digestive system. It floods the hippocampus, where there's many, many receptor sites for cortisol, and that's our memory center. When people get compromising the immune system, that's why when someone's stressed, they get sick. If you get a good night's sleep, cortisol levels drop about 10 to 12%. But when we have that transcendent experience in meditation, cortisol levels drop 30 to 40%. Not magical. It's a mechanism that we all have deep inside that we have not been accessing. And David, you could start coming out. He really has great films. When we access that, a point I wanted to say is, this is not a discussion of either or. It drives me nuts. I've been teaching meditation 45 years. I do body scan, breathing. I do those things. Pranayama, feel the body. Those are fine. It's not people say, well, I do mindfulness, so I don't do this, or I do that. No. It's too small. It's siloing. Particularly with kids, but all of us. We should not be closed off, but there should be criteria. Is it scientifically proven to work? Are there certification of teachers? And so that's the message here. If we're talking outcomes, mindfulness has a cognitive training. Transcendental meditation gives the experience of the transcendent. After you transcend, you can do whatever you want. You can pray. You could read Marcus Aurelius. That came from. Just popped into my mind. Anything. You could do fine. But start with that experience of transcendence. And by way of introduction to David, I want to say one of the last things about the brain that I find really interesting. A creative person, there's now 3 different aspects of they used to think that creativity was like the right hemisphere. Remember that? Oh, the right hemisphere is creativity, the left hemisphere is sort of one's the artist, the other's the scientist. Well, it turns out it's not regions of the brain. It turns out it's networks. And there's a network of the brain called the executive control center. It's the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that you use to focus and concentrate. Then there's another part of the brain. It's not a very interesting word, which is the default mode network. When I first heard that, I said you could fall asleep hearing that word. But it's also called the imagination network. And it's a part of the brain, connects the front of the back, and it's past, future, and it's the creative center. When the default mode network is activated, the mind is more creative. In our daily life, you can be working hard on a problem and you say, I got to take a break. Just go for a walk. Take a hot shower. It's the other part of the brain, the imagination center. Usually, one is operating or the other. There's a thing called the salience network, which turns one on, turns the other off. One is operating or the other. In creative people, both are operating simultaneously. The ability to focus and the ability to roam, wander. And so with that, one of the most extraordinary human beings I know, and a creative genius in par excellence. Please welcome David Lynch.
Hey, Bobby. How are you all doing? Good? Good to be back up in the Northwest with all of you and those beautiful Douglas firs. I grew up in the Northwest. I was born in Missoula, Montana, lived for a while in Sandpoint, Idaho, lived in Spokane, Washington, and lived in Boise, Idaho. My grandfather, Lynch, was raised in the state of Washington here. I'll see you all later.
Well, hello, everyone. I am back. And David, it is definitely an honor to be on stage with you again. I'm Edward from Town Hall, and I'm going to help relay some of your questions. We had way more questions than we have time to get to, but we'll try and get through as many. But because this is a once-in-the-lifetime opportunity, I will take a curator's prerogative question, inspired a little bit by those remarks you just made. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I think of your art very much as deeply entwined with this place. It's hard for me to walk in the forests in the Northwest and not hear a little Angelo Badalamenti music in the back of my mind. And so beyond those life experiences around art and creativity and even spirituality, what does those spaces of the Pacific Northwest mean to you in your work and those quiet, still, dark forests that are so evocative?
Well, I think you just said it. The forest is so magical, as you all know. You go for a walk in the forest, it's like a cathedral, and it's got such a mood, and during the day it changes. There's beautiful sounds. It's sometimes so still, so fantastic, so many great smells. I love Douglas firs. I love vertical grain Douglas fir for building, but I love pine. My father's favorite tree is a ponderosa pine. I love the smell of pine. I like to cut pine with a hand saw so you can smell it. So fantastic. And so you get a lot of things in the Northwest. I think what we have as a child, it feeds, the work somehow that you do later on.
And we had many questions about meditation, and many on this similar theme, but put very succinctly by Carolyn here. So Carolyn, if this is your question, please stand up, which is just, when and why did you start meditation?
I've told this story a whole bunch of times.
There's Carolyn right there. Thanks,
Carolyn, where are you? How you doing, Carolyn? Good. You can sit down. You don't have to stand up. You know, in the Northwest, when I grew up, I never heard the word meditation. And I heard the word, I think, the first time, around the time the Beatles started meditating, went to India with Maharishi. And when I first heard about that, I thought meditation is a fad, and it's a waste of time, and I wanted no part of it. I said, it's fine for the Beatles, and I hope they keep making music. And then I heard a phrase, true happiness is not out there, true happiness lies within. And that phrase had a ring of truth to it for me. But the phrase doesn't tell you where the within is, and it doesn't tell you how to get there. So it's a very frustrating phrase. Then I start thinking, wait a minute, maybe meditation is a way to go within and find that happiness. So I suddenly got very excited about looking into meditation. And I found out there's many, many, many forms, as you heard from Bobby. One day my sister called. I have to tell you, I looked into many, many things. I read many books. I talked to lots of people, asked a lot of questions. Nothing I found seemed right. And then my little sister called and said she started Transcendental Meditation as taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. I listened to what she told me about it. It sounded very good. But more importantly, I heard a change in her voice. More self-assuredness and more happiness. And I said, I want this thing, and I went and got it.
Another common theme in many of the questions was the relationship between the darkness that is in so much of your art and the optimistic vision of transcendental meditation, and it's put very beautifully by Amber C., who's in the audience.
Amber?
How do you mine... There's Amber over there. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you.
And she asks, how do you mine your subconsciousness for sounds, visuals, story ideas without getting lost in the Black Lodge?
You know, I talked about this before. People say, David, if you're so happy and blissful and you want to do this, how come you make these films you do? And I say that stories, you don't have a story that's just a flat line of happiness from beginning to end. Stories have conflicts, all kinds of life and death situations, so many different types of characters, conflicts, and that's the nature of stories throughout time. And I say, keep the suffering in this book or on the screen, but not in your life. And I say you can be very, very happy shooting a death scene. It's part of the story. And it's a thing that you should understand human nature, understand suffering, but you don't have to suffer to show suffering.
And another contrast that many questions touched on, because I think many people in this room identified themselves as artists who are interested in meditation, and is a question that I think was put very well by Iskra. If this is your question, please stand, Iskra, which is, how do you reconcile the anxiety of the creative process with the ambitionless peace of meditation?
This is a great question. Before I started Transcendental Meditation, I thought, Bobby says David hates the word calm. I do hate the word calm. Because I thought maybe this form of meditation in general is going to make me very calm and not want to work, or make me want to start knitting doilies. And I said, I do not want that. And artists want to have an edge. They want to have a power. They want to have their own voice and do their thing. Another thing, I didn't want to join something. And I thought, I have to overcome these things to go down to the center and learn to meditate, learn transcendental meditation. And what I found was that when you transcend every day, transcendental meditation is a mental technique. It's not a religion. It's an ancient form of meditation that Maharishi revived for this time. In transcendental meditation, you're given a mantra. A mantra is a very specific sound, vibration, thought. And this mantra you're given is like a law of nature designed for a specific purpose. And that purpose is to turn the awareness from out, 180 degrees to within, within. And then you will naturally dive through subtler levels of mind, subtler levels of intellect, because each deeper level has more charm, they say, more happiness. And at the border of intellect, you transcend. You experience the big treasury, the big unbounded ocean of pure consciousness. And this consciousness within has qualities. In that beautiful ocean, eternal, always been there, is unbounded intelligence, unbounded creativity, unbounded happiness, known as bliss, unbounded love, universal love, which feeds personal love, unbounded energy, unbounded power, unbounded peace. It stands to reason if you could experience that, and every time you experience it, you infuse some of that. So you truly begin to expand whatever consciousness you had to begin with, and all those positive qualities. And there's a side effect to expanding consciousness and those positive qualities. The side effect is negativity starts to lift away. Stress, traumatic stress, anxieties, tension, sadness, depression, hate, anger, need for revenge, and fear automatically start lifting away. Just like when you ramp up light, automatically darkness goes. It's so beautiful for the human being. And I call negativity the suffocating rubber clown suit of negativity. It's stinking, old, heavy rubber. And it's not nice to be in that. And when that starts to dissolve, it's so beautiful. So I say practicing transcendental meditation, transcending every day, is like bringing in the gold and saying goodbye to garbage. And you get way more of an edge. You're diving into unbounded creativity. Stands to reason you're going to get more creative, more happiness in the doing, more energy. It serves the work. You don't lose your edge. And I say negativity is the enemy to creativity. When someone's really depressed, they can hardly get out of bed, they say, let alone work or catch ideas. And I say negativity squeezes the tube that these ideas flow through. It cramps everything. Real bitter, selfish anger, it poisons the person and it poisons the environment. When all this stuff starts, bringing in the gold, saying goodbye to garbage, ideas start flowing easier. When you expand consciousness and more, that ball of consciousness, you can catch ideas on a deeper and deeper level. So beautiful for the life, so beautiful for the work.
And yes, thank you. I think following from that, a great question from Jill Watson. Does the stillness of transcendence stay with you all the time, even during emotional moments? How does that work? It sounds awesome. And she has a great doodle of the Eraserhead baby on her question.
That's good.
There's in the front row.
Good to see you. The beautiful thing is, like if you save up your money and you want to get a gold Cadillac, and you finally go down to the dealership and you get that car you just love. You're so happy about that car. And you just love it so much. You keep it clean. You love driving it. You're really, focused on that car when you're driving, smiling about it. A year later, the car is dirty, got some dents in it, there's stuff on the rug, and it's like the happiness came, but it kind of goes away. And then that phrase, true happiness is not out there, true happiness lies within, is a true thing. The more you transcend, the more you build up this happiness within, and it doesn't go away. It stays. You got like a little bubble of happiness inside. And this bubble of happiness is so beautiful. It's like a flak jacket. The things that used to almost kill you, they don't get you so much. And the people that looked so frightening, they look more and more like a friend. That boss that used to give you so much trouble, you're worried about losing your job, you kind of start liking him, even when he says these things to you. And you understand why he's saying it, but it doesn't bother you so much. You want to put your arm around him and take him for a coffee. It's really beautiful. And this happiness grows and grows. All those attributes grow and stay with you. It's so beautiful.
And here's a question from Stefan. What on-screen moment best encapsulates the transcendental? And maybe that could be in your own work or in others' work.
I think music has a power to get you, in a beautiful place that's reminiscent of transcending. And so I guess any number of, scenes that have some kind of music that gets you are those moments that come closest possibly. And transcending, the experience is unique. It's, you experience it and you say, wait a minute, where has this thing been? It's so blissful. And this thing of bliss, they say bliss takes up where happiness leaves off. Bliss can be physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Your body can vibrate in happiness. The emotions just sing, and the mind sings, so happy. And it's a spiritual thing all at the same time. It's very, very beautiful, thick, beautiful bliss is within every one of us. The big treasury is within every human being. And it's every human being's birthright to one day unfold that and enjoy supreme enlightenment, the full potential of the human being. It's very, very important. And I just have to drift away a little bit. Maharishi had a phrase, water the root and enjoy the fruit. Get the thing from the deepest level. They say we are like a tree, or the world is like a tree, and the tree is pretty sick. The leaves are turning yellow, some of them are brown, and there's charities for all these leaves to try to get them green again, but it's on the surface. Some of the boughs are bending down, branches are bending. The tree is not healthy. They say the experienced gardener, he knows the leaves are not looking good. He knows the branches are bowing down. The experienced gardener waters the root, and automatically that whole tree starts coming up to perfection. Pretty soon those flowers appear, the leaves turn green, and the fruit appears. It's very, very beautiful. Transcending is getting it from the deepest level. There's another thing. This field within is a field of unbounded, infinite peace. Always been there. It just needs to be enlivened. And Maharishi brought technologies to enliven that field so powerfully it can affect collective consciousness. And you can picture collective consciousness these days like a dark, brooding cloud. And that cloud can be turned to gold. That cloud can be filled with happiness and love and peace, harmony. Even if people don't meditate, the same things can happen for the world that happen for the individual. Stress can go, and real beautiful gold, those all positive qualities can grow, and people start liking one another. They don't want to kill anybody. And those things that happen today in Florida won't happen. When students get this, the fighting stops in the school. They start getting along with one another. The bullying stops. The teachers don't get teacher burnout. They start enjoying to teach again. Always throughout time, it comes from within. And it's got to get to the people.
Many questions asked if you incorporate sound or music into your own meditation.
No. It's like Bobby's book is called Strength In Stillness. That transcendent is silence. It's unbounded silence. I say unbounded silence and unbounded dynamism together in that, transcendent. It's blissful, and it can come in waves. It's a beautiful, beautiful field. You get ideas. Sometimes I've gotten ideas in meditation, but mostly you use meditation to get, to expand that consciousness. And then when you go back in activity, you don't have to give up anything to start to meditate. You don't have to believe in anything. And you just go about your business when you finish meditating. And what my personal experience has been is that ideas start flowing. And once in a while, I get an idea I fall in love with. And that's a beautiful, beautiful day. When you get an idea, you see it, you feel it, you hear it, and you know it. And then you just stay true to that idea when you make a chair or a painting or cinema. Stay true to the ideas that you fall in love with. And that incorporates, sound and picture and light, costumes, makeup, certain way people speak, the speed of things, the fast or slowness of things. All these things are dictated by the idea. The idea is the thing.
Well, this goes nicely with this question signed just C. Are ideas ours, or are they gifts meant to share?
This is so beautiful. I say ideas a little bit. I'm like, if you want to catch ideas, my experience has been you desire an idea. And desiring, I say, is like a bait on a hook. And you have a desire, you lower that hook in, and lo and behold, if you have patience, like in fishing, you'll catch a fish, an idea. And I always say, another part of the fish is like, the chef doesn't make the fish. The chef cooks the fish. So in a way, it's very hard to take credit for an idea. It's the gift. It's a gift. And it's just like the chef. He can cook it in a good way or a bad way, but doesn't make the fish.
And we're getting close to the next phase when we'll invite Bob back on stage. But I wanted to echo many of the questions and also personally say thank you so much for the great gift that was Twin Peaks Season 3. It came as quite a surprise. And
thank you.
What a format to have an 18-hour David Lynch film to watch. And one of my favorite pieces that was echoed by many of the questions in it was the incredible selection of music and wonderful bands that you incorporated into it. And many people asked this, and this could be maybe a final fun question. What are some band recommendations you have now? You have such incredible taste in pop music, better than most of us in this room who may be a little younger than you.
Well, let's see. I just was over in the country of Georgia, and Georgia I'd never been to Georgia before. I didn't really know where Georgia is. It's in a strange part of the world, and but they probably think Montana and Idaho and Washington are strange, but great people. We were in a restaurant, and after the meal was done, the waitresses, they're in white kind of uniforms with a kind of piano key black design. 7 women came out and stood in front of us. I thought, what is this? I think they just were maybe wanted to be acknowledged for serving a good meal. But they started singing. And this is polyphonic harmonies. It's unbelievably beautiful. These voices were so crystal clear. It was phenomenal. These girls sang so beautifully. Then later we were taken to this great rehearsal hall, and in that place they gave a show of dance and singing. And the singing was male voices. And these men came out, and again, unbelievable power, unbelievable beauty. And at the last thing they did, they asked us to come forward, and the men formed a semicircle around us, and they said, you know, it could be very quiet. And they started singing very quietly, but with these harmonies, and tears just shot out of my eyes. It was so beautiful, unbelievably beautiful. And I also, Michael Horse, Deputy Hawk in Twin Peaks, turned me on to a guy named Justin Johnson. You could find him on the internet playing the 3-string shovel. And he also does While My Guitar Gently Weeps on a oil can guitar. Very great player, incredibly good guy. I recommend Justin Johnson and Georgia voices.
You heard it here first. So we'd love to welcome Bob Roth back to the stage,
Okay.
and the two of them will continue to chat. Thank you so much for your questions. Sorry we couldn't get to more.
Bobby?
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Bobby. You got a chair here.
Yeah. Which side do you want?
You go on that side. Well, I'll go over there, Bobby. You stay here.
I'm being directed.
Okay.
What we want to do now is just take a moment and talk a little bit about this thing that I opened with, and that is meditation properly understood and practiced is not it does take us away. It allows us to access that transcendent, but it has a very powerful transformational effect in our environment. And I want to just give you some good news, and we're going to show a video and then talk a little bit, okay? 2 years ago, the University of Chicago Crime Lab put out a request in Chicago, grassroots organizations in Chicago, help us reduce violence in the schools in the toughest communities in Chicago. Nothing is working. 230 organizations submitted proposals. They selected 3. David's foundation was one of the 3 to bring what's called quiet time, where they begin and end each school day with like 10 or 15 minutes of meditation, transcendental meditation. They gave us $300,000 for a pilot study. The effects were so marked that last year they increased it to an additional $1 million, and we expanded the program, helping children access what David was just talking about, that transcendent level, their own self. So successful last year, this year the budget was increased.
Your microphone, Bobby.
I know. I'm 67. Microphone, shoes. Was so significant this year they increased the budget to $2.6 million to expand it to many more schools. We're now looking to raise the money to replicate it in New York City. That was with 2,000 students, with 4,000 students in New York, Washington, D.C. We would love to replicate this in Seattle. It has to stop. This violence, we are killing children with stress, pressure, demands, and it cuts across. It's not just the kids in under-resourced schools. We see it in our own children. It has to stop. David and I were talking, we're going to medicate everybody, just bullies and the bullied, everybody it's crazy, it won't work. So we'd like to show this video of this, this is a sizzle reel of the work of David's foundation, 4-minute sizzle reel.
The idea of what you're doing, of putting this into schools, I think is a fabulous thing.
Before, I held everything in, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I took it out on somebody else. Now, it just goes away now.
I feel like all the stress is just leaving my body, all the situations and problems are just clearing out.
I got more concentration, I social better, everything just like 2 times better basically.
It took me roughly 5 years to admit that I had PTSD. Transcendental meditation has taken the stress out of my life. It has made me relax. The anger's gone.
Just because you can't see a wound doesn't mean it's not there. To know that something as small of a concept of 20 minutes twice a day can make me feel like I feel now, that's a gift that you can't buy.
Within 90 days, I was off all the anxiety pills, antidepressants, the pain medication. You don't have to suffer anymore. There's a better way.
I didn't know I had post-traumatic stress. The first experience meditating with TM, my body got a chance to just really relax. And my self-esteem is a lot better than it's ever been in my entire life.
When I started meditating, it changed my demeanor. I really felt like it changed the dynamics for me, the way I responded or interacted with people. And also not sitting like this, because I got rest.
I went through a really dark time in my life where I didn't want to wake up in the morning at all. Now when I wake up in the morning, I feel happy, I feel blessed.
Meditation has significantly helped my recovery, and I think it should be taught in every rehab facility there is.
Transcendental meditation is the only proven form of meditation to reduce blood pressure. It affects the cortisol, the epinephrine. The whole system just relaxes.
When people start to meditate, they're doing things more effectively and more efficiently, and time seems to open up.
I meditate before every performance now, and I find that it keeps me out of my head. It's a much more enjoyable way to perform. TM has helped me to be more open to new possibilities.
I really have found that I am more aware of those stressful moments that are still going to happen even after meditation, but my reaction to them. I recognize them, and I just am at a peaceful state.
You have to give yourself a break. You have to give yourself a moment to revive, unplug, rejuvenate, and Transcendental Meditation does that for me.
I think this is what people need. They don't need high-minded talk so much as results.
Real change for the good truly begins within.
When you see that after, we started this foundation July 20th, 2005. You see that, what are your thoughts?
I love this reel, and as what I was saying earlier, these many well-wishers of humanity have come up with all kinds of ideas to help with stress and violence and suffering, but they're surface cures. And if you watch TV these days, there's so many problems. It's unbelievable. And then there's all this arguing and nobody really listening, and it just kind of stays the same. And the secret is within each one of us. And it's so beautiful, the change that comes when you access that transcendent. You transcend every day. It's so beautiful for the human being. You start enjoying life, and the whole world looks better. And I say real peace is not just the absence of war. Real peace is the absence of all negativity. When you think about it, if there's any negativity, it's not a real peace. And this is entirely possible today. These peace-creating groups are be powerful enough, if they get big enough, to bring peace to the earth and stop all this nonsense. It really is true. So think about these things And if you're an artist, don't worry about losing your edge, and know that you're going to get more and more ideas and more power to do your stuff. And it's okay to, be, a TM meditator. You don't have to tell anybody if you don't want to, but it's money in the bank for your life and your work. And if you want to support the peace-creating groups and help the world and yourself, you can do that too. And enjoy the woods up here.
I want to say one last thing. David just, you could listen to this and you can say, well, peace and happiness and change the world. And I was in a meeting. I had taught a reporter, this was in 2007, I taught a reporter to meditate, and he was doing interviewing Maharishi, and he was doing 50 years, because Maharishi's TM organization was 50 years. And it was a sort of a perfunctory conversation and, niceties. And then he said, my real question is, I think, you should dial it down, Maharishi. The benefits here. You should just dial it down. It's just like too much. That the world has, people have been traumatized for eons, and just violence and that. And you're talking about how meditation could have such a powerful transformational effect. It's like unbelievable. This has been going on forever. And Maharishi acknowledged what he had to say. And then he said, you can have a room that's been in darkness for one day, and you can have a room that's been in darkness for 1,000 years. You turn on the light in both rooms, the darkness disappears. So the hypothesis is that there's something really big within every one of us that has nothing to do with religion, nothing to do with philosophy, nothing to do with belief. It's there. We just don't access it. We don't take the time. And taking the time to access it, fortunately, with this meditation, very simple. And it's not simple because it's simplistic. It's simple because there's an elegant naturalness to it. So a 10-year-old child that I teach to meditate in the South Bronx, who's never heard of meditation, who goes to sleep at night because he has to lie down. He can't sleep on a bed. Yes, there's a concrete sort of foundation before the wall. He sleeps there, so bullets can't hit him when he's sleeping, for real. That child can have equal access to that transcendent that David or any one of us. So I would just like to conclude that it's very fulfilling for me to have this opportunity to work closely to one of, and he hates this when I say it, to one of the greatest all-around human beings that I know, David Lynch, because I am now full circle from 50 years ago when I was writing the gripes of Roth and desiring to affect change, that the change truly not only does come from within, it is coming from within. And now that's the truth. We have an office on Capitol Hill, and we're teaching members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and people in the Department of Education, and people in SAMHSA, which is the drug agency, and people in the VA. And they're seeing for themselves the futility of this superficial cures and addressing, and seeing that this can have a powerful transformative effect. So I want to thank David very much for leaving his painting studio 3 days ago and coming up here. And he likes to give, and he's very kind to give me and others with the David Lynch Foundation credit, but ultimately it's this man's integrity, creativity, purity of intention that is really driving this whole thing forward. So thank you very, very much, David, and thank all of you for coming tonight. Thank you,
Thank you so much, Bob Roth and David Lynch. So they'll be going around the curtain here. One more thing.
I just want to say, Bobby Roth has been a TM teacher for 45 years. He's taught thousands and thousands of people. He works 24/7, for others, and gets a big happy charge doing it. And his book, Strength in Stillness, get a copy of this thing and get one for a friend, and let's get going on a happy, peaceful world and happy people. And I wish you all the very best. Thanks a lot. Thank you all. Thanks a lot. Where do we go?
You can go right around the curtain here.
Okay, we'll see about this. All right.
And for the rest of you out here, if you already have a copy of one of the books, you can line up at the back of the room here, and we will start signing in just a